Boston, Massachusetts. Cold rain fell across the city as 30-year-old Elena Ortiz stepped out of her prenatal appointment with a smile on her face. She was 8 months pregnant. Every heartbeat she heard during these visits made the baby feel more real. After years of trying, she and her husband, Daniel, were finally going to become parents. The nursery at home was almost finished. Tiny clothes were neatly folded inside a white dresser. A wooden crib stood beside the window, waiting for the day their son would finally sleep in it. Just before leaving the hospital, Elena looked at the latest ultrasound picture one more time. She smiled and gently placed it inside her handbag. Her phone rang. It was Daniel. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Elena replied. "The doctor says he's healthy. I'll finish work in about an hour. I'll be home before you. Drive safely." "I always do." She ended the call without realizing it would be their last conversation. Outside, the rain had become heavier. Most people hurried toward their cars, trying to escape the weather. Elena unlocked her silver SUV and reached for the driver's door. Before she could open it, someone grabbed her from behind. A cloth covered her mouth. She struggled. Her shopping bag fell onto the wet pavement. She tried to scream, but no sound came out. Within seconds, everything around her became blurry. The rain. The lights. The parking lot. Then, nothing. At 7:45 p.m., Daniel arrived home. The house was dark. He smiled, expecting Elena to surprise him from the kitchen like she often did. Instead, silence. He called her phone. It rang once. Then it went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Nothing. His smile slowly disappeared. He called the hospital. The appointment ended over an hour ago, the receptionist told him. Mrs. Ortiz already left. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He checked her location through the family app. No signal. He grabbed his keys and drove back to the hospital himself. Elena's SUV was still sitting in the parking lot. Locked. Empty. Her handbag rested on the passenger seat. But Elena was gone. Daniel called 911. "I think, my wife has been taken." By midnight, the case had reached the Boston Police Department. Detective Sarah Bennett had investigated dozens of missing person cases. But one sentence immediately caught her attention. Victim, 8 months pregnant. She closed the file for a moment. Time wasn't just important anymore. It was everything. Every hour reduced the chances of finding both mother and baby alive. She assembled her team before sunrise. "We treat this as an abduction until proven otherwise." Crime scene officers searched every inch of the hospital parking lot. Most of the rain had washed away possible evidence. But near Elena's parking space, one investigator found something trapped beneath a tire. A white cloth. It was carefully sealed and sent to the forensic laboratory. Meanwhile, detectives collected security footage. One camera showed Elena leaving the hospital. She looked calm. She even stopped to answer a text message before walking toward her car. Then she disappeared behind a row of parked vehicles. The next camera should have shown her reaching the exit. It never did. There was a blind spot. Exactly 42 seconds with no camera coverage. 42 seconds. Long enough for someone to make a woman disappear. At the State Forensic Laboratory, Dr. Emily Carter began examining the cloth. A few hours later, Detective Bennett received a call. "You need to see this." Sarah arrived at the lab immediately. Emily placed the evidence report on the table. The cloth contains traces of a powerful anesthetic. So she was unconscious. Almost instantly. Emily pointed to another section of the report. There are also DNA samples from 2 unidentified individuals. Sarah looked up. Any matches? Emily slowly shook her head. No criminal records. She paused. But whoever planned this knew exactly what they were doing. Detective Bennett started reviewing every missing person case involving pregnant women from the past 5 years. At first, nothing seemed connected. Different neighborhoods. Different ages. Different backgrounds. Then one detail changed everything. 3 women, all in the final months of pregnancy, had disappeared under strangely similar circumstances. Each one vanished near a hospital. Each vehicle was left behind. None of them were ever found. Sarah leaned back in her chair. This wasn't a random kidnapping. Someone had been hunting pregnant women. And they had been doing it for years. She looked at Elena's smiling photograph lying on her desk. Somewhere in Boston. A frightened mother was waiting for someone to find her before it was too late. Sarah quietly picked up the case file. We're bringing you home. By sunrise, Elena Ortiz's disappearance was making headlines across Boston. Her photograph appeared on television screens, news websites, and social media. Volunteers searched nearby parks, rivers, abandoned buildings, and empty parking garages. But there was no sign of her. For Daniel, every passing hour felt unbearable. He barely slept. Every phone call made his heart race, hoping someone had found his wife. Instead, every call ended with the same answer. No updates. Detective Sarah Bennett refused to believe Elena had simply vanished. Someone had planned this. Someone had studied the hospital, the parking lot, and Elena's routine. She returned to the security footage and watched it again. Frame by frame. For nearly 2 hours. Then she noticed something everyone else had missed. A dark delivery van appeared outside the hospital almost 20 minutes before Elena's appointment ended. It never made a delivery. It never picked anyone up. It simply waited. A few minutes after Elena disappeared, the van quietly drove away. Sarah immediately ordered officers to track every traffic camera in the area. Several cameras captured the same vehicle. But every license plate was fake. Meanwhile, Elena slowly opened her eyes. Everything around her was dark. Her wrists were tied. The room smelled of old wood and chemicals. She tried to move, but a sharp pain shot through her body. Instinctively, both hands moved to her stomach. The baby kicked. Tears filled her eyes with relief. My baby. She whispered the words to herself. No matter what happened, she would protect her child. A metal door suddenly opened. A woman carrying a bottle of water stepped inside. She looked to be in her late 40s. Her face showed no anger. Only sadness. You need to drink, the woman said quietly. Elena stared at her. Please, help me. The woman looked away. I can't. Before leaving, she placed the water beside the bed. I'm sorry. The heavy door closed once again. Back at police headquarters, another discovery shocked the investigation. Sarah's team compared Elena's case with 3 older disappearances. All 4 women had visited different hospitals. All 4 were in the last weeks of pregnancy. And all 4 disappeared within 10 minutes of leaving their appointments. Someone wasn't choosing victims randomly. They were following expectant mothers at the forensic laboratory. Dr. Emily Carter received another piece of evidence. Investigators had recovered tiny blue fibers from Elena's SUV. Under the microscope, the fibers matched industrial moving blankets, the thick blankets commonly used inside delivery trucks to protect furniture. Emily immediately called Sarah. They weren't using an ordinary vehicle. They prepared it. Sarah nodded. They've done this before. Hours later, another report arrived. A young pregnant woman from a neighboring county had called police. She believed someone had been following her for 3 days. The same dark delivery van. The same driver. Everywhere she went. Sarah wasted no time. Officers rushed to her neighborhood. But the van had already disappeared. It was becoming painfully clear. The kidnappers were already searching for another victim. That evening, Elena heard voices outside her room. She quietly moved closer to the door. The buyers arrive tomorrow. The baby must be healthy. The mother doesn't matter. Elena froze. Her breathing stopped. For a moment, she couldn't understand what she had just heard. Then the horrifying truth hit her. They didn't want her. They wanted her baby. She wrapped both arms around her stomach and silently cried. She wasn't just fighting for her own life anymore. She was fighting for the tiny heartbeat growing inside her. Sarah gathered her team once again. This isn't a kidnapping for ransom. The room fell silent. No demands. No contact. No financial motive. She placed photographs of the missing women across the table. We're dealing with an organized trafficking network. They're stealing unborn children. No one spoke. Even the experienced detective struggled to process what they had just heard. Sarah looked around the room. We don't have weeks. We may not even have days. Late that night, one officer rushed into the command center carrying an old case file. Detective. You need to see this. Inside the file was a report from 6 years earlier. Police had raided an abandoned farmhouse after receiving an anonymous tip. The building was empty. No arrests were made. But investigators recovered one disturbing item. A medical bracelet. It belonged to a pregnant woman who had disappeared 2 months before. At the time, police believed it was an isolated case. Now, it looked like the first piece of a much larger puzzle. Sarah stared at the faded photograph of the farmhouse. If the network had once operated there, where had they moved now? Somewhere out there. Elena was running out of time. And the people holding her captive were already preparing for whatever came next. For the next 48 hours, Boston police barely slept. Every detective, patrol officer, and federal agent worked the case. Dozens of search warrants were executed. Empty warehouses were searched. Storage units were forced open. Nothing. It was as if the people behind Elena's kidnapping had disappeared into thin air. But Detective Sarah Bennett refused to give up. She believed every criminal made one mistake. The challenge was finding it before another life was lost. At the forensic laboratory, Dr. Emily Carter was re-examining every piece of evidence collected so far. The white cloth. The blue fibers. Even the mud found on Elena's SUV tires. One sample immediately caught her attention. Tiny grains of reddish soil were mixed with fine white dust. She compared them with hundreds of soil samples from around Boston. Only one location matched. An abandoned brick factory on the outskirts of the city. Emily called Sarah immediately. I think I found where they'd been. Within minutes, police vehicles surrounded the old factory. The building had been abandoned for nearly 15 years. Broken windows covered the walls. Rusted machinery stood untouched inside. It looked completely empty. Sarah wasn't convinced. She ordered her team to search every room. Nothing. Then one officer noticed fresh tire tracks leading behind the building. The tracks ended near a large metal storage shed. The lock had been replaced recently. Sarah signaled the tactical team. Open it. The door crashed inward. Inside were medical supplies, hospital gowns, baby formula, and several empty cribs. The kidnappers had been there. But they had already left. On a nearby table, Sarah found a notebook. Most of its pages had been burned. Only one page survived. It listed several dates. Hospital names. And one address, miles away. Elena could barely stay awake. She had been locked inside the same room for days. She had no idea where she was. The only person who ever entered was the quiet woman who brought her food and water. This time, Elena looked directly into her eyes. "You have children, don't you?" The woman froze. "My daughter is waiting for me," Elena continued softly. "My baby hasn't even been born. If you help them, another child will lose their mother." The woman's hands began to shake. For the first time, guilt appeared across her face. Without saying a word, she quietly slipped a small object beneath Elena's blanket before leaving. After the door closed, Elena looked down. It was a tiny key. That night, Elena unlocked one hand from the bed frame. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared someone would hear it. She slowly opened the bedroom door. The hallway was silent. She followed a faint light toward another room. As she looked inside, she stopped breathing. 3 pregnant women were lying on hospital beds. 2 were unconscious. 1 quietly cried as she held her stomach. Elena realized she wasn't the only victim. This was far bigger than she had imagined. Before she could help them, footsteps echoed down the hallway. She quickly returned to her room and locked the chain around her wrist again. Seconds later, the door opened. One of the kidnappers stepped inside. He looked at her for a moment, then walked away. He had noticed nothing. Meanwhile, Sarah's team tracked the address found inside the burned notebook. It belonged to an old farmhouse nearly 50 miles outside Boston. The property had been abandoned for years. But electricity records showed something unusual. Power usage had suddenly increased 3 weeks earlier. Someone was living there. Sarah didn't wait for sunrise. She called the tactical unit. "We move tonight." Just before midnight, police surrounded the farmhouse. Every exit was covered. The team entered through the front door. Inside, they found expensive medical equipment. Stacks of fake birth certificates. Forged adoption documents. Thousands of dollars in cash. The evidence confirmed their worst fears. This wasn't the work of one kidnapper. It was a well-organized trafficking network. Then, a faint sound echoed from beneath the floor. Someone was crying. An officer discovered a hidden trapdoor beneath an old carpet. Sarah pulled it open. A narrow staircase disappeared into darkness. She raised her flashlight. "Let's go." One step at a time, the team moved underground. The crying became louder. Sarah tightened her grip on her flashlight. She knew they were only seconds away from finding the truth. And she prayed they weren't already too late. The hidden staircase led deep beneath the farmhouse. The air was cold and damp. Detective Sarah Bennett and the tactical team moved carefully, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Then they heard it again. A woman crying. Sarah rushed toward the sound. Behind a reinforced steel door, they found 4 frightened women. 3 were pregnant. The 4th was Elena Ortiz. She looked exhausted. Her face was pale, and tears filled her eyes as she wrapped both arms around her stomach. For a brief second, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Police," Sarah said calmly. "You're safe now." Elena broke down in tears. "My baby." Sarah gently nodded. "We're getting both of you out." As officers began freeing the women, a loud engine roared outside. One detective looked through a basement window. "They're running." Several members of the trafficking ring had escaped through the back of the farmhouse. Sarah immediately divided the team. "Get the victims to safety. I'm going after them." Police vehicles raced across the narrow country road. The suspect's van sped through the darkness, ignoring every stop sign. The chase lasted only a few minutes. One of the kidnappers lost control while turning onto a wet bridge. The van slammed into a guardrail. The driver tried to run. He didn't get far. Within minutes, every member of the trafficking group was in handcuffs. The nightmare was finally over. Back at the farmhouse, paramedics examined Elena. The baby's heartbeat was strong. For the first time in days, Elena allowed herself to breathe. She wasn't just alive. Her baby was alive too. As she was placed into the ambulance, another woman quietly approached Sarah. It was the woman who had secretly given Elena the small key. With tears in her eyes, she said, "I never wanted any of this." She explained that years earlier, her own son had died from a serious illness. The leader of the trafficking network had offered her money when she was drowning in debt. At first, she believed the babies were going to families who couldn't have children. She didn't learn the horrifying truth until it was too late. By then, every attempt to leave had been answered with threats. Sarah listened silently. "What you did was wrong," she finally said. "But giving Elena that key saved lives." The woman lowered her head as officers escorted her away. The investigation continued for several weeks. Computers recovered from the farmhouse exposed the entire operation. The group had been targeting pregnant women near hospitals in different states. They used fake identities, forged medical records, and illegal adoption documents to hide their crimes. Several missing women from older cases were finally identified. Some had survived. Others had not. Their families, after years of searching, finally learned the truth. It was painful. But at last, they had answers. 2 months later, Elena returned to the same hospital. This time, she wasn't there for a checkup. She was in labor. Daniel never let go of her hand. After everything they had survived, neither of them took a single moment for granted. A few hours later, their son entered the world. Healthy. Crying. Perfect. Daniel held him for the first time with tears streaming down his face. Elena smiled as she gently kissed her baby's forehead. For days, strangers had tried to steal this moment from her. They had failed. Several months later, the courtroom was filled with reporters and the families of the victims. The evidence was overwhelming. Life slowly returned to normal. The scars never completely disappeared. Some nightmares stayed with Elena. Certain sounds still made her heart race. But every morning, when she saw her little boy smiling in his crib, she reminded herself of one thing. They had survived. Not because evil was weak, but because good people refused to stop fighting. Detective Sarah Bennett continued her work, knowing there would always be another case waiting. Dr. Emily Carter returned to her laboratory, where every tiny piece of evidence could one day save another life. And Elena chose to share her story publicly, hoping that it would encourage expectant mothers to stay aware, trust their instincts, and never ignore suspicious behavior. Her story became more than a survival story. It became a reminder that behind every missing person case is a family waiting, hoping, and refusing to give up. Because sometimes, the greatest act of courage is simply refusing to stop looking until someone comes home.